life can be tough, right? Our feelings get hurt. We all know that. There's loads of things that can hurt our feelings. If you look at the different instances that happen in any other day, we can feel like we're losing grip. Not even losing grip on our sort of state of mind, but just losing grip on life. We can lose money, relationships can go wrong. And this isn't once or twice, but this is a recurring pattern in our lives. We can get heartbroken. We feel heartbroken sometimes, even when we don't know why, right? It's tough. Motivation can then drop, right? So, and this once our motivation goes, once we feel we've got no real sort of drive towards life, we start to feel depressed. And that's essentially really what depression is. So the question remains, how do we get back? When the wind tries to blow us down, how do we stay strong? How do we get back up? And how do we make sure later on, whenever it blows, and it will, because that's what happens, we don't get blown over? So essentially, what can we say? I'll give you an example. This is Mike, right? So, like anyone else, like any other sort of ordinary fella, Mike goes through bad times. Sometimes things occur that he doesn't really want to occur, and that can trigger parts of his psyche. It can make him think in a certain way or act in a certain way. And these are learned parts of our minds, and especially they're triggered when things are tough, right? So when we're younger and we go through issues, these parts of our minds can start to form in personalities. Those personalities can be varied. We've got things like the critic or the saboteur, the judge or the people pleaser. All of these things have been triggered to act when situations get tough. So the first step, going back to what we were saying, if we get knocked over, how do we stand back up? Probably the most important thing, how do we stand back up? How do we stay stood up? So interestingly, maybe the answer isn't quite what you would think. The answer is being aware of all of those different subpersonalities is what allows us to find our feet again. Because most of the time we're acting out of them, and when we act out of one subpersonality, obviously we're acting in one mode. The more mindful we are, the more grounded we are. So it's not that we don't feel the need to be a particular way, it's just that we're able to observe ourselves. Being mindful gives you roots. It kind of puts your feet on the ground. It doesn't mean that you're not feeling stuff. It doesn't mean you don't feel the temptation to act, to judge people or judge a situation or be critical or, maybe be overly romantic. It doesn't mean that you don't feel all of those feelings. Actually, what it means is that you are able to stay in the moment, feel all of those feelings, and yet not get consumed by them, and therefore not toppled over by them. And that can include your fear or anxiety. How nice it is to be able to feel anxiety, like we all do, but not feel as though you're consumed by it. To feel fear or feel trepidation, but not be consumed by it. So step number one, developing some mindfulness. Still in the mind, quietening the mind, gives you the ability to put your feet firmly on the ground. Yeah, so mindfulness is clearly vital, right? One of the things that's difficult in the mindfulness trend at the moment, which is fantastic, but I find a bit confusing, is being mindful of what? I've been meditating 30 years now, so I'm pretty familiar with the ideas, but for me mindfulness is just a gateway. You then have to look to see how you apply that mindfulness into your life in order to give you the kind of benefits you want, in order to change in the way that you want to change, right? And I think the answer is being mindful of our need. If one is mindful of one's needs in everyday life, then we can start to develop a kind of sensitivity. Mindful of one's need for food, mindful of one's need for water, mindful of the need to breathe, have shelter, comfort, relationship. You've probably come across this kind of thing in the work of Abraham Maslow, who did the hierarchy of needs, right? But there's another set of needs that lie below this that really are needs that if we pay attention to them, they can do a lot of the work for us. They can bring a lot of our sub-personalities together and give us kind of energy and drive. And these are primal needs. They're like deep currents in the psyche that sit below our subpersonalities and the daily sort of ebb and flow of our emotions. And if we can put a bit more focus into them, and if we can consciously work on them, they can change how we develop and how we move through our lives with a bit more direction and a bit more meaning. So the first of these primal needs, really, which is probably the more core part of all primal needs, is activity. By focusing on our activity, by looking every day at how we are active and in what ways we are active, we can up our activity. Essentially, it's speaking to the sort of core will of our being. What do I do with my day? How much of my day is actually doing, and how much of it is stopping myself from doing? Which is actually taking up a lot of energy, right? So we probably know that lying around, getting to the end of the day, we feel more and more tired. But when you're active and you're constantly, clinically, clearly and mindfully working on the type of activity you want, you can achieve a massive amount. At the end of the day, you feel energized, you don't feel tired. So activity is the most fundamental of all the primal needs. And in doing that, in tracking that activity, on a very basic level, we'll start to bring together all these sub-personalities around that action. We'll find we have more energy because of it. Activity gives us energy.